Welcome to episode 105 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hey, welcome everybody. If you are new here, and if you're not new here, welcome back. But if you're new here, I just want to give you the 411 on this podcast. This is the Air Hug Community Podcast, and you can also think of it as a midlife mojo discussion board. So in this podcast, we come together to talk about midlife. We talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, all the emotions. We talk about approaches for living better. We talk about all sorts of things. We bring in guests. And this is just something that was created as a need out of my business from Grateful Fitness of working with women. I wanted to have a place where we could come to talk about things further. And so this is the place. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Let's get after it. Hey, what do you call Mexican protein and amino acid? What do you call a Mexican with no protein? No way, Jose. What did the BodyBuilders say when she ran out of protein? No way. Okay, so by now you get it. Today we're going to chat about protein. I don't know why. I just felt compelled to come up with a joke because, I don't know, this could be a dry topic, but I will tell you the whole reason I'm having this chat today with you is because you asked for it. So many people have expressed anxiety and just frustration with not getting enough protein in their diet. And so they have asked, and here we are. You asked, here we are. Let's do it. So back in episodes 102 and 103, we did chat about some of the myths and mistakes around female fitness. And one of the myths that we uncovered was that many people believe that too much protein will make you fat. Well, duh. The fact of the matter is that too much of anything will make you store fat on your body. So that's like no surprise there. But, what is too much protein? We're going to get into that later. And then here's a mistake that a lot of people make is neglecting to get adequate protein in. And this is where I got a lot of comments. So a lot of people said, oh my God, that's me, that's me, that's me. So today we're going to talk about the midlife protein chat. So why is protein essential? And it is, by the way, to good health. So let's answer that question straight off the bat. Why is protein essential to good health? Well, in a nutshell, we actually need protein to keep our body from basically falling apart. We need it to repair and prevent muscle loss. You know I love to get on a soapbox about that, but I'm not going to right now. We need protein also to make things like blood vessels and the blood that goes in the vessels. We need it to make connective tissue. Yes, we need it to make muscles stronger, like our heart muscle. We need it to make antibodies so that we can fight off diseases. We need it for enzymes. We also need it to make hair and nails. So one more vital reason, and I think this often takes a back seat to a mineral that everyone thinks is very popular. And calcium is very popular, and calcium is essential to building strong bones. But what do you think calcium attaches it to build new bone? You got it. Protein and amino acids. So protein and amino acids form the framework of our bones. And then other minerals like calcium and other minerals attach to it to actually form bone. So you don't just need calcium for strong bones, you need protein too. Okay, so we all agree that we need protein to maintain a healthy body, right? Now, the question is how much? Before we go any further, I would like to say a word about the RDA. And that stands for the recommended daily allowance. So the recommended daily allowance of something like nutrients, minerals, macronutrients, and micronutrients. Basically, is what we're talking about is proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. Okay, the recommended daily allowance is the amount you need for basic survival. Okay, basically, if you were a bump on a log, if you were a very sedentary person, that's the amount you would need. So if you exercise or you're active, you're going to need more. And of course, you know, if you want to stay healthy, you had better be exercising and be active. But I don't need to tell you that, right? So the fact of the matter is that the RDA is really not enough. And it always irks me that when they talk about that. So the RDA for protein, and I'm going to talk in terms of pounds, but we can mention kilos too. If you're in the US, you're thinking in pounds. If you're in the rest of the world, you're thinking in kilos. So the recommended daily allowance, right, for protein is 0.36 grams per pound or 0.8 grams per kilo. And this is body weight. So bodybuilders generally get way more than that. If you're a bodybuilder or you're really trying to build muscle actively on your body, you want to be more in the range of 1.0 to 1.2 per pound of body weight. So I have been anywhere in the range from 1.0 to 1.2. Right now I'm probably in a range of like 0.9 to 0.1 to maintain where I'm at. And I just threw that in there for a frame of reference. So most people are somewhere in between that 0.36 and that 0.1. And that's not a bad thing. You just have to kind of narrow it down and figure out what's going to work for you. So if you don't measure and weigh your food, so let's say you're not a measurer and a weigher. Some people are, some people aren't. I recognize that. If you follow macros, then you do measure and weigh. But about a palm size portion. Now you have to use your own palm. You can't use someone else's palms. It's bigger than yours. Look at your palm. It has a length, a width, and a depth. That's about a serving of protein for you. It just so happens that your hand has that right there for you. Isn't that nice? You don't have to bring it anywhere with you. It's always there. So how many of those per day to round out adequate protein? And this would probably be more, this will definitely be more than the 0.36 per pound, but I don't think it'll be as much as 1.2 grams per pound. So it's in between that somewhere. And it would be 3 to 4 of those servings a day, palms a day. So that's a nice way to do it. You can think about a palm-sized portion of lean meat, right? Not so fatty, fish or beans. You can think of, in terms of eggs, I usually say it's 1 to 2 eggs plus 1/3 to 1/2 cup of whites. So 2 eggs really isn't quite enough. If you're going to do 2 eggs, you can throw in like maybe 1/3 of a cup of egg whites. I like to do 1 egg and a half a cup of whites, or a lot of times I'll just do a full cup of whites, and I might add like a tablespoon of a hard fresh cheese like Parmesan or Pecorino Romano. So I just got off on a tangent because, I love to cook and eat, so I shared that. Let's talk about yogurt and dairy. So yogurt would be like somewhere between 2/3 and a cup of plain yogurt if it's Greek yogurt. If it's not Greek yogurt, you're going to have about 1/3 of the protein of Greek yogurt. So Greek yogurt has about 3 times the protein of non-Greek yogurt. So I'm going to tell you, eat Greek yogurt. We're going to talk about yogurt in a few minutes. But right now I want to talk about signs that you may not be getting enough protein. All right. So here are some signs where you may not be getting enough protein. And this is really good for you to know. If you are chronically tired, if you cannot power through your workouts, if you're experiencing hair loss where you weren't before, if you're experiencing flabbiness where you used to have muscle, any of these things may be a sign of protein deficiency. Now, I want to just say really quickly that hereditary hair loss, protein deficiency does not cause hereditary hair loss. Genetics do. So if there's hereditary hair loss, such as male pattern baldness, that's a different thing. That has nothing to do with a protein deficiency. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we got Some naysayers. Okay. I want to cover all the bases, right? Of course. Okay, let's talk about plant versus animal protein because I feel like there's a lot of discussion about that. And there's definitely a push to eat more plant protein. And there's pros and cons to both. So the thing with animal protein, which can be very high in protein, but it can also be very high in unhealthy fats. So you definitely want to stick to most of the time choosing leaner cuts of animal proteins if you're going to do that. Now, if you're choosing fish, the fats in fish are actually good fats, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But let's move on to plants. So the nice thing about plants is plant proteins that have fat in them, think of like things like nuts and nut butter, have good fat in them. But the bad thing is nuts and nut butters and fatty seeds are 75% fat and more like 25% protein. And actually, that's not exactly true because there's a little bit of carbohydrate in there, so the numbers are slightly different. But basically, it can be a very big challenge if you're relying on things like nuts and nut butters to get your protein because you can easily put yourself into a calorie surplus. So, other plant proteins, things like legumes, beans, okay, they tend to be higher in the starch. So they don't have a lot of fat in them, but they have way more starch than they do protein. And again, they are a great source of protein, but you have to be careful with overall calorie consumption because you can actually be eating more calories than what your body needs. And if you notice that you're storing more fat than you want to, and you do eat a lot of plant protein, you may want to rethink your portions and how you're doing things. And that can be really hard. Like if you're vegan, it can be a big challenge, but it can be done. So for most of us, a combination of plant and animal protein that you find satisfying and that you can live with is a great way to go. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do one or the other. I guess I wouldn't recommend 100% animal protein just because we need the fiber from plants. So, but anyways, that's where we are with plants and animals. And it's definitely worth looking into. There's other plant proteins too, legumes. You also want to soy, and soy is another topic, but it's not all bad, nor is it all good. There's a wonderful little bean, black soybeans actually, by the way, are pretty low in carbohydrates relative to other beans, and so is a bean called lupini. Lupini beans are really interesting because they have a 1-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein, but you actually have to like them. So I go in spurts where sometimes I really, really like them, and then other times I'm like, I don't want to see another lupini bean ever again. So right now I'm kind of in the don't want to see another lupini bean for a while. I think I ate a lot of them a few years ago, and so now I've kind of had my fill. But anyways, that happens with us, right? And that's why variety is great. But so when should you eat protein? Here's the thing. The traditional American diet where you have a great big amount of protein at dinner and maybe not so much at breakfast and throughout the day is not the way to do it. You want to actually give your blood supply a constant replenishing, if you will, of amino acids. And amino acids are what protein breaks down to in our blood, and that's how we actually repair and rebuild all the tissues that we mentioned before. Hair, nails, blood vessels, muscles, heart muscle, enzymes, antibodies, all those things. They need a big amino acid pool, and it needs to be constantly replenished because we need to be putting in because it's constantly being taken out throughout the day. So every meal should have the equivalent of a palm-sized piece of protein. And I don't know if I talked about plant protein, but just think about a nice handful of maybe beans, for example. Okay, moving on. Let's get over to dairy because there was a few things I wanted to talk about dairy. Dairy can be a good source of protein, but it also can have some problems with it. Number one is a lot of dairy is treated with hormones. So you absolutely want to stay away from any dairy. And I'm talking about cow's milk, but also think of sheep's milk and goat's milk. Here in the U.S., you don't want anything that's treated with hormones, and you definitely want organic because the number one, the hormones can come through if we ingest dairy that was from an animal that was treated with things like growth hormone, and it can really screw up our own hormone balance. And the last thing we want to do in midlife is screw up our hormones. They're already wacky as it is. We don't need to add to it. So I would say go ahead and love dairy if you love dairy, but please, please, please stick to organic and hormone free. So organic, you don't want the pesticides either. There are so many pesticides that are known to be carcinogens and toxic to our body, but yet they are not ruled out by the FDA. So if the mammals that graze on things that are full of pesticides are going to have that in their milk, and any dairy product we eat that has it, we are going to ingest it as well. And we're just putting ourselves at risk. And really, why should we? We don't need to. There's plenty of these things available. Okay, so I'm going to get to yogurt. In order for something to actually truly be a yogurt, it has to have two organisms in it. S. thermophilus. I don't know what the S stands for, but it's like the first name, okay? And then L. bulgaricus. Bulgaricus. And again, L is like the first initial. So the thing is, even if it's still yogurt, doesn't mean it's healthy. Some yogurts, for crying out loud, are worse than like, a drink at Starbucks or a dessert. So anyway, by drink at Starbucks, I mean one of those like 400 calorie drinks that are full of empty calories. Okay, yogurt can be that way too. So what you want to look for in yogurt. So I highly, highly, highly recommend going with Greek yogurt because it's just about 3 times higher in protein if you're using it for a protein source versus non-Greek yogurt, because it's actually strained and they strain out. It becomes more concentrated and thick. Okay. Also, I 100% recommend organic. It's up to you if you want to go full fat, low fat, or no fat. You can figure that out in the balance of your day and how much fat you need in your diet. That's something that if you measure macros, it's kind of going to be measured for you. So you'll figure it out. You're like, oh, well, I just had 5% fat yogurt. I might, maybe I'm going to have to cut down on fat somewhere else in my day. It's up to you. If you really like it and eat it, enjoy it, then do it. I mostly like non-fat yogurt because I find it flavorful enough, but once in a while I'll have full-fat yogurt. Okay, almost never will I have full-fat yogurt, let's be honest. Anyways, because there's so many other things I'd like to eat, and I really do like other fats, like avocados and nuts, and those are high in fat, so I kind of like to save, and olive oil, I kind of like to save my fat for that. But anyways, you want to make sure your yogurt has no additives like artificial flavors. Fake, fake, fake. Fake means not good for your body, right? We don't want sugars added, thickeners, and it needs to be truly fermented. So any yogurt that is truly fermented will have a seal that says live and active cultures with the initials LAC from the National Yogurt Association. So I personally would not eat any yogurt that doesn't have that seal. And some brands, by the way, are heat treated. And what does heat do to live and active cultures? It kills them. So it may have been yogurt at one point in time, but by the time it gets to you and it's already been heat treated, it may no longer have the benefits of a fermented food with active cultures. So just wanted to point that out there since we're talking about sources of protein. All right, let's talk about protein powders. Do you need them? No, you don't need them. But if you like them, you can have them, right? They're not going to kill you. But what might hurt you are protein powders, again, like the yogurts that are loaded with artificial ingredients. So I look for protein powders either whey or plant. I personally prefer plant, and it's just a stomach issue with me, a GI issue. My body doesn't really like whey protein or casein protein, so I stick to plant protein. Now, that's great. Again, some of the plant protein powders can be higher in carbohydrates than others, and that's not a problem. Again, you just want to make sure you don't put yourself into a calorie surplus. If you're choosing one that maybe that's the one that tastes the best to you, you may want to just, cut out your carbs a little bit somewhere else. Now, we're not saying to cut carbs completely. I'm just saying you want to find the balance. Whether you pick a plant protein with a little bit of carbs or moderate carbs, it's all okay. It's about finding the right balance for you. So I have found several plant proteins actually that I like. One of the things that I will tell you to avoid like the plague is artificial sweeteners. And personally, once again, I always go for organic protein powder because I don't want a protein powder that's likely to have pesticides in it. So that's just what I'm going to tell you about that. So it's up to you what you want to do. Again, you want to keep everything in balance. So here's the thing with protein. Look at those guidelines. And if you're increasing protein in your diet, know that if you're trying to eat to maintain your size or maybe in a slight deficit to drop a little bit of stored fat, if you think you have more stored fat than you're happy with or than is healthy for you, then if you're increasing protein, you're probably going to have to decrease another macronutrient. So quick review. What are the macronutrients? Protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Our body needs all of them. We would never eliminate these as a food group. Nobody's allergic to protein, carbohydrates, or fat. Nobody. We need them all. Now, you may be allergic to some carbohydrates. Maybe you have celiac and you can't do gluten, wheat gluten. Okay, got ya. That's fine. A lot of people say they do better when they don't eat gluten-containing products. Getting off on a tangent here. That's a really interesting finding. And a lot of times the reason is because they're eating highly processed products containing gluten, like things made from flour, baked goods, cereals, breads. So they may think that it's gluten when in essence it might be that you're actually eating something that is so refined and tastes so good, and food manufacturers do this on purpose. Refined carbohydrates with either sugar or salt or fat or all of that taste really good. They're really palatable. They're delicious. I'd rather say delicious. They're delicious and they actually make us crave more. So for some people, you may need to stay away from carbohydrates that are highly refined. And actually, the more refined something is, the less nutritious it is. So you would be doing yourself a favor to actually eliminate those things as much as you can. Do you eliminate them 100%? It's up to you. I mean, I know people who don't do any flour or sugar, and I know people who just do it minimally. You know what you can handle, and you'll know by the cravings that you have. Maybe you get headaches. Maybe you get that glucose spike, and then maybe you go hypoglycemic. That happens also a lot. It used to happen to me with bagels. And what are bagels made of? Highly refined flour. Stopped eating bagels, stopped happening to me. It's really interesting, right? And I know some other people who have experienced the same thing. So let's talk about a typical day. Maybe you're eating 3 or 4 meals a day. If that's the case, you want that palm size serving of protein at each and every one of those meals. So breakfast, it might be yogurt, fruit, and maybe a whole grain cereal. That's one of my favorites. It might be protein powder in a smoothie with some fruit, some veggies, maybe a tablespoon of peanut butter or a little avocado or some flaxseed for good fat and fiber in there. Or maybe it's eggs with whole grain toast, and a piece of fruit. Or maybe it's just eggs and veggies. Another one of my favorites is a scramble made with egg whites and maybe a little bit of cheese, or maybe not. Some days I like it, some not, and a side of fruit. There's my favorite lunch, by the way. So if I, at least more days of the week than not, if I don't have that for breakfast, I'll have it for lunch. I just, you can cook it up in 10 minutes. It's easy. Bing, bang, boom, Okay, so lunches, again, could be that scramble. It could be lean fish or meat on a big salad, maybe with some beans on it, or it could just be more beans and a little bit of cheese on a salad. It could be a fish, a bean, or a lean meat taco with lots of veggies. The other thing, most of your meals should have half your plate filled with veggies. And, I don't like to say the should, but it's recommended, and that just helps you get your fiber, it helps you get your micronutrients, it keeps you full, and it helps you from eating in a calorie excess. So there's that. Dinner could be kind of like lunch. Another something I'll enjoy very often with my husband, at least once a week, we'll do the lean meat with veggies and maybe a starch and definitely a salad. Or we'll do a high protein pasta with loads of veggies that we either roast or quick stir fry and a salad on the side, or it might be something like greens and beans with a little bit of cheese. Sometimes I'll do greens and beans with a tiny little bit of like poultry sausage, or it could be a stir fry with loads of veggies, either lean meat or fish or shellfish, and then maybe either rice or quinoa. Now, I have a bone to pick with Panera. Panera calls quinoa a protein. Everybody, quinoa is a grain that has protein in it. It's not a protein-rich food, but it's got more protein in it than rice or potatoes. But it's not a protein. It's still about 75% starch. It's a great grain, don't get me wrong, but if you wanted to rely on quinoa on a given day or a given meal for your sole source of protein, you're going to need to eat a lot of it, and it's going to be really hard to maintain calorie balance. So just keep that in mind. So that's the 101 on protein in midlife. Oh, midlife. Wait a minute. We are in midlife, right? Well, I am, and a lot of the audience here is. Why do we actually need more protein in midlife than maybe what we did beforehand? Okay, you guys, I think you already know the answer to this, but I just want to make sure you know. So, because if we're not doing something to build muscle after the age of 30, we're losing muscle. And building muscle, yes, we do work on that in the gym, but we also need to work on it in the kitchen. So it's great that you're doing those wonderful workouts, but if you're not eating enough protein to repair and rebuild the muscle, then you're not going to repair and rebuild the muscle, and your efforts are going to suffer. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, there is a thing in older men, and I don't know, I can't remember. I looked it up and I had it, but I can't find it in my notes. There's a thing in older men where they actually don't, I don't want to say digest, they don't utilize the protein that they eat. I don't know that much about it. We can look it up, but if you're concerned for maybe some of the men in your life, you can always Google it. I did not find that to be true for women in the studies that I looked at today. So listen, I hope this was helpful. If it's about as clear as mud and you want to talk more about your own nutrition strategy, reach out to me and we can do a one-on-one call. Okay? All right. Thank you so much for joining in. I appreciate your listening to the Air Hug Community Podcast. And if this helped you in any way and you think it might help one of your BFFs, please feel free to share it with them.